meeting in this venue. There was nothing I could do about it because I can't tell the judges to cancel court. So we talked about having a second community session similar to this, and we will make sure it takes place in a bigger facility. But for those of you who have seats, if you could take them, we have some empty seats up front. There's some empty seats on the side. My name is Jim Quigley. I'm the supervisor of the town.
I'm happy to take it.
The purpose of this meeting
I'm not sure what the formal process
is to allow GlidePath to present the project and allow the community to respond with questions, comments, whatever you have. And as I said, we will probably, from the looks of this, have a second session within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I know that there are some people that were taken back by the weather. We will accommodate them. Mr. Rood here, who is from GlidePath, has spoken to anyone who has contacted him directly, and I'm sure he will continue that. So at this point, I would like to turn this meeting over to Peter Rood from GlidePath to start the organized remarks.
Great, thanks, and definitely appreciate everyone coming out. As Supervisor Quigley said, we will, given the interest here, we will have another one of these sessions. In the next coming weeks to make sure people who either couldn't come or can't hear us or have more questions have an opportunity to talk to us. Other kind of quick note is that everything you see tonight, all the slides, all of the boards that are in the back, we will have on our website, the project website, by the end of the evening. So these will all be available in the current form for you to look at, download, review at home, that sort of stuff. And so will the slides that I'm going to show tonight will be there.
Is there a reason why this is starting early? Because there may be people coming at 7?
The room is at capacity, and that's why we said we'll have a second full session at a later date for whoever does show up late.
Right, so I guess real quick, because there are so many people here, I want to point out some of the safety. If there is an evacuation need, there are the 2 doors you entered through. There also is a door in the back here, and we'll make sure that if there is an evacuation that we help you out the right door. So like Supervisor Quigley said, we are at capacity. We will make sure that we have staff here tonight to make sure that anybody comes at 7 o'clock for the presentation, gets the information, we'll provide them with information and stuff, but it's a safety issue. We can't have any more folks in the room here. So, the plan for tonight is we will walk through a presentation that we have that helps orientate kind of the project details, shares what we know about the project, what we're planning, what we don't know, and provide kind of all that information at once to folks. Again, given the number of people, we don't plan to have a full-on forum Q&A. After the presentation is over, we will have our staff around, and I'll point them out, and you can come ask us questions. We also have provided written cards around the room. So if you have questions that you don't get answered tonight, please write your questions down and we will respond to them. We also have our phone number and our website, and we usually call people back within 24 hours. You can call or email us. I know there have been some folks who I've met tonight that have done that, and hopefully they can attest the fact that we do call people back. So if you have questions, we're not trying to avoid questions. It's just, as you can see, a lot of people and not a lot of us. And we want to make sure everybody has the time to chat with us. So that's the plan. If you have questions about what you're seeing on the slide, raise your hand. I'll try to answer them. But I do want to try to get through everything and get people on their way and make sure we have time to chat with people. Yes, ma'am.
I tried calling the phone number that you have listed.
Yep.
And it says unavailable.
Yeah, so the postcards we sent out, we switched to 3 and a 0. So we do have a phone number. The one on the website is correct. The one on the cards here tonight is correct. The one we sent out, the invitation postcards, I'll let you guess which zeros got switched. But if you try enough, one will work. But yeah, we do have a phone number. It is correct. The postcards we mailed to some people, wrong number, but we do have a real number. I promise you. It's on the website. Call it. I'll be there. I don't know. I don't have it memorized. Chris can look it up on our website. We'll share with you in a second here. It's a local number. I don't have it memorized, unfortunately. Which is probably why it's here on the postcards. Okay, so tonight with the slides, here's our plan. We're going to talk about who GlidePath is, so who we are, what our company is, who we are as individuals, We're going to talk briefly about why we think the project is needed and why it's a good idea. We're going to talk about more specifically what it's going to do, so there's the need and what it does to meet that need. We're going to talk about where it is in the town, and then we'll talk about some of the potential community and environmental impacts. So we'll talk about where we are with our studies and reviews and that sort of thing. That's the plan. So GlidePath. So GlidePath Power, we're a small independent power developer, power producer, owner of power plants, formed in 2013. And the group of us that formed it, we're a relatively small company. We all come from larger, big multinational power developers and got bored doing large wind farms, large solar projects, large natural gas projects, and wanted to do what we thought was more interesting stuff. And so we started developing battery projects in Chicago. We've taken on some aging wind projects to repower them and turn them into something better. And we've started looking at the New York market and looking at how we can bring our storage experience to the market here. And so we are a low carbon focused company. So I say low carbon, not no carbon, because we do consider certain forms of natural gas generation to be lower carbon than other forms of fossil fuels. So we're low carbon, not no carbon. And our kind of technology focus is wind, solar, energy storage, standalone energy storage, and we're calling a hybrid plant, which is energy storage combined with, again, those high efficiency gas generators. And that's who we are. That's kind of our mission. We're based out of Chicago. I personally live in Minneapolis. We have some other folks in Michigan, but that's kind of where our staff is at. Again, here's the map. So our current portfolio is just over 300 megawatts of projects completed. About 80 megawatts are battery, set of 4 battery projects in the Chicago area. And then we do own a portfolio of 6 wind projects, 4 in Pennsylvania, 1 in West Virginia, and 1 in California. So 304 megawatts total, about 10 projects. We have active development like this project kind of throughout the U.S., New York, and some other states, but those are the ones we've completed.
When you have battery up there, are they all frac gas-based batteries like this one?
Those batteries do not use any gas.
So this is the only one that is frac-based gas in the hybrid?
This is the only one that uses gas that we've developed.
Frac.
Yes. Well, we're the test.
So
Yes.
what
Frac.
are these used?
Wait, say that again?
Yeah.
We are going to be the only time that you're using this hybrid gas here in New York?
Yeah, it's a new technology.
So this is your project, so this is really like guinea pig project?
That's not, so both of these technologies are very developed technologies. The gas generation system has been used for a century probably.
Okay,
This is
that's
the
all
first.
well and good, but my question is, this is the first time gas hybrid is being used
This is the
through
first
your
time.
company that's only been in operations for 4
Ma'am,
years.
can I ask a question? Please allow GlidePath to finish the presentation. There's a lot of people in the room. There's a lot of people in the room. There's a lot of questions.
To everybody in this room, we were supposed to start at 6 o'clock, have an hour presentation.
Forget what you're gonna ask then if you wait until he finishes.
This is pretty
Ask the
important
questions
though.
when he finishes.
No, we wanna ask it as he's presenting it, so we have it fresh. Why you gonna wait an hour afterwards? You don't know what you wanna ask then.
Wait,
So this
You
is
wanna
the
ask him
first-
as he's presenting it.
I believe, sir, excuse me, I
Mr.
believe you
Quigley, with all due
prefaced your
respect to all
whole,
the residents
your
here,
whole
please.
presentation with, please interrupt me if you see something on the board. Did you not say that?
So
Did you not say that for us to interrupt when we saw something to ask at that point? Correct?
that's the statement I said, yes.
Yes, so that's what we're doing.
So here, we're trying to help communicate about our project. If we can't get past the 4th slide, it's going to be difficult for us to communicate all of the information that we think is important. There are a lot of people here.
This is very important to us to do
The
what
fact
you
that it has
asked us to
frac
do.
gas is pretty important.
There are a lot of people here. I want to respect everyone's time. I also want to ask everybody's questions. The questions been asked are very good questions. We're not trying to not answer them. I'm happy to spend all night here today. I'm happy to spend all day tomorrow, all day the next day answering questions. But I think it's reasonable for us to work through the presentation so that people who don't have your questions can either have their questions answered or can go on with their night. So if you don't mind, we would like to get through the presentation and then we can address your questions. We'll provide an opportunity for you to write them down, provide opportunities for you to contact us afterwards, or you can stay and talk to us about the project.
Excuse me.
That's what we'd like to do.
I'd just like to say, I thought between 6 and 7, we were supposed to find out about what was,
So the plan for the evening
and
was
you were
that,
going to do your presentation.
Ma'am, you're right. You're right. I made a call. I made a judgment call. The room is at capacity. We can't fit any more people
Don't
in.
yell at us. Don't yell at us.
Please, can I finish?
With all due
Can I
respect to
address her?
everybody in this room.
Can I address?
No, you are not, no, because it's not affecting you. It is affecting us.
All of us.
All of us here have a voice to speak and ask questions per slide.
Ma'am, did I answer your question?
Well, I thought that between 6 and 7, we were going to come and get informed.
And then we're going
Then
to
we can ask questions.
Right.
But
Part
they
of-
need to be informed.
Part of being informed is allowing them to do their presentation.
Well, I thought that was at 7.
so we
I
can do it
thought we
again.
could
and
ask questions.
the issue is we also, we want to make sure everyone's safe. And so we can't put more people in this room.
What does that have to do with it? We got the people here asking questions. We're not asking about the people outside or didn't come. We
No,
want to ask questions
We're going to
tonight.
answer your questions. I want to get through the presentation first.
Oh, I thought you were doing it at 7. So we shouldn't ask questions.
You can ask questions. We're trying to move through this because there are a lot of people here who want to share the information. We're not trying to avoid your questions. We'll answer your questions all night. I'll set up in my car and sleep there tonight if you guys want to ask questions all night long. We're trying to do that. We're trying to be efficient and get through all this information. Some of your questions may be answered in the conversation.
A frame of reference.
Yes.
You said you're going to come back, or Supervisor Quigley said you'll come back in about 3 weeks and hold another meeting.
Yes.
But you'll give us advance warning.
Yes.
And you'll have set up Q&A and a facility sufficient to handle all the people who will be there.
We'll try. Yes, we'll try.
Correct.
Well, you can't try. If you're gonna have 500 people, you gotta have a place to put
No,
them. You can't get 1,000 people here and then you got no place to put them.
So
Like
town
you made a
hall-
judgment call and it's already wrong.
Right.
And there's
Town
enough
hall-
room for anybody.
Right.
Town hall has a capacity of about 150 people. Now, if you're telling me right now, I need to go get Miller Middle School with 600 seats. Okay. Well, then we'll do that for the next meeting. But the purpose of this meeting, which was originally designed for the people in the Risley Street, Sunrise Park neighborhood, those were the ones that were directly communicated with by letters.
We're all here.
What do you think we're doing here? If we're not part of those communities? I mean, come on now.
Okay.
We're gonna have to bring the emissions and with it.
All right. So, enough about us, I guess. So the project. So I'm gonna try to provide a very brief overview of the New York energy system. It's going to be very condensed. It's going to be very simple. I understand some people in this room may know a lot more about it. Some may know a lot less. But this is intended to help frame the next few slides of why we think the project's a good idea. So the energy system, the utility system, is made up of 3 primary components. There's capacity, which is the idea that when you want to turn your lights on, the lights will turn on. There's the energy, which is the generation, the power that makes the lights actually turn on. And then there's the services that keep the grid operating in an efficient and technically correct way. Basically make sure your lights don't blow up or aren't dim when they turn on. So those are the 3 major components of the energy system. It's far more complex than that, but these are the 3 basic components. Our project is focused on 2 of them. We're focused on capacity and we're focused on services. We are not, even though we generate energy, we are not focused on primarily generating energy. There are lots of projects out there that generate energy and that's their primary focus. Our focus is providing capacity, which means that we serve as the provider of last resort. So when there isn't, other power plants are not generating and there's demand for more energy, we are one of the plants that can come online very quickly, provide that energy, and when it's no longer needed, shut down. And we provide services that make sure the grid can do what it's supposed to do within a very tight technical timeline. So I'll talk about, technical specifications. So I'll talk about those a little more in a second. But that's really maintaining power quality, through ever-changing conditions, because the grid's always changing. There we go. So, there are several reasons why this project's needed. And one of them, obviously there's a lot of interest in this room on reducing fossil fuels. We think that's a good idea as well. Our entire careers, my personal entire career has been focused on low carbon generation technology. Chris's entire career has been focused on that. We believe in that. What we're looking to do with this project is make stepwise progress to reducing the need for fossil fuels. So the services we're providing, capacity, frequency regulation, reserves, are all currently being provided for the most part in New York by coal and natural gas plants. What we're proposing to do is develop a much more efficient project that provides those same services with significantly less carbon or CO2 emissions. Not zero, but less. And we think that's progress in the right direction for reducing the overall carbon emissions of the grid. And the way the market works in New York is that our project will, by the way the system is designed, displace those more expensive, higher carbon projects. The other things that we do, somewhat as an addition to that, is because we're able to provide what are called frequency regulation services, we can help integrate variable generation, which for the most part is renewables like wind and solar. They're variable generation because it's difficult to predict at any moment exactly how much energy they're going to provide, and they are often changing their energy output, which means that the grid has to accommodate for that change, because when a wind turbine ramps down or a cloud goes over a solar facility, there's not an equivalent amount of lights that turn off, or not an equivalent amount of dishwashers that turn off. And when the sun comes up and solar projects start generating, there's not a one-for-one turning on of air conditioning. So the grid operator has to balance all of that. And it's very challenging. And right now, the most common way they balance it is by throttling up and down existing combined cycle natural gas plants. They also do it with hydro, which is obviously zero carbon, but most of it in New York is done by throttling up and down existing natural gas plants. So with our project, we help add more renewables to the system because we provide those services and we do it lower carbon. Not zero, but lower carbon. It's also, because we're a distributed plant, we believe that in the long run, as our project is built and as several other projects across the state are built, we'll reduce the need for new transmission lines. And those transmission lines bring energy from where it's generated, which historically has been big 1,000 megawatt, 2,000 megawatt power plants, bring it to where it's needed across the state. And with distributed generation, instead of having big centralized generation, you spread the plants out around the system, and you don't need to transmit the power as much. So that's alternative power lines. And the last thing is, all of this, we have an eye towards doing it at a competitive price. In the end, the way the power grid, the way your utility, the way the grid operator called New York ISO decides which power plants run and which ones don't run, in the end, it's an economic decision. The most inexpensive power plants start first, and then they ramp up. So renewables are often the lowest cost because wind is often actually below zero from a price standpoint, and solar is often zero because the fuel is free. So those are always, renewables are usually taken up very early on, but as you start ramping up the curve, you need to make sure, the grid operator has a duty to make sure that they're selecting the lowest cost of energy. And so we think we can provide all of these services at a lower cost than the companies that are providing the services today. So those are the four things that we think it's needed. Quick questions?
Yeah, I just have some clarification. So you started off your PowerPoint presentation by saying that you were an on-demand, that you would power on and power off.
Yes.
So that's different than replacing aging and inefficient providers. How do those two go hand in hand? How do you replace, if you're an on-demand provider,
Yep.
how does that coalesce with replacing aging and inefficient providers? Replacing an aging and inefficient provider would seem that you're going to take over that role, which would require you to be more than an on-demand supplier.
So, yeah, so let me clarify. We're replacing, so the services that we're talking about providing, frequency regulation, spinning reserves, and capacity, those services aren't new services. Those have been around since the beginning of the power system. And what I'm talking about is we're displacing the providers of those services, which are currently older, in many cases, older and less flexible plants. So we're not talking about displacing operating generators that provide energy that turn the lights on. I'm talking about displacing the providers of those services that I mentioned.
Okay, which were again?
Frequency regulation.
What was that? What is that?
Frequency regulation.
Frequency regulation, okay.
Yeah, which is balancing the second by second up and down, so the lights on and off.
So again, and they do that by an on-demand basis?
They do that by throttling their generation, for the most part.
Okay, so how do you determine when you're going to be doing this activity?
So we'll be participating in the exact same market they're participating in. So there's a frequency regulation market that's operated by the New York ISO. We will be participating in that, competing head-to-head with those other providers. And because we're faster, and because we're going to have a lower cost, we will win and they won't. And so we'll be selected by the services and they won't.
Peter, this was a peaker project, right? So it would address more peak needs, and that's hence the competition.
That's the capacity. So we're providing several services. One is capacity, peak and capacity.
Right. And if you're as good as you say you are, and in the proposal, or at least in the environmental assessment form, it says that this plant would operate during peak periods, or possibly 24/7. So if you're that good, it would be running all of the time.
So here's the deal. So we will be providing services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Many of those services don't require us to be running at full output all the time. Sometimes we may have to be running it all and still providing the service, because the service is the fact that we're there, not that we're actually generating. Sometimes we provide the services that we're not operating at all. Sometimes we'll be absorbing power with our batteries and not generating at all. We'll be actually consumer power. Other times we'll be generating full output. We are studying the project from an emission standpoint, from a sound standpoint, from anything that matters standpoint, as operating 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at full output. And so for those purposes, I would encourage you, and I'm telling the town, to encourage you to assume we're going to operate 24 hours a day. I'm not trying to say that we're not planning to operate 24 hours a day, because there are some days when we will. And so I think for things like emissions and sound and those sorts of things, that is the proper assumption, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What I'm sharing with you now is what we think our business plan is for the project, which is not to do that.
I mean, the reality of the situation is you profit from being on the most that you can.
We profit from being available, not
On.
So how?
That's not, that's not how it works.
Yes, it is.
Capacity-
And the only way that you're going to profit from this project is by creating electricity.
That's not accurate.
Well, then explain to me how it is.
So in New York, there is a capacity market. So plants get paid for existing and being ready to go, not for operating. That's one of our key sources of revenue, is that capacity market where we're getting paid to exist and be available and not committed.
So, I just want to. So what is the percentage of you're going to just build a plant, and what if you're not even needed to be operating? If we don't, you just said you might not have to operate 24/7. So you're going to sit there and not be operating at all.
Yeah, and we'll get paid.
Well, that doesn't make any sense.
That's how it works.
You don't need it there.
I think this is one of the things that we're most confused and have the most questions about, is how much of the time you think that gas portion of the plant is going to be running.
So
if it's running 24/7, your emissions are a lot higher than 195 pounds per megawatt hour. This
No.
must be your hybrid emissions rate.
No, that's our full 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Per unit of electricity generated by the gas. So it's 195 pounds per megawatt hour. So that's
You're producing 20 of them at a time. So multiply that number by 20.
If I can clarify, if you multiply this number by 20, you have to multiply this number by 20. Because this is a unit comparison for every megawatt hour that we're using full output. You're replacing it with 1 megawatt hour of this, so it scales based on how much.
And regardless, there's not a power plant there right now. So anything that you're producing is extra from what it is now.
We don't have a coal plant next door.
This is all extra. I don't care how low it is, it's all extra.
We'll move, if you don't mind, move on. This is clearly, this is new. So we are adding generation to the system. We are adding capacity to the system. We're adding regulation service to the system. We believe the way the market works, that we will displace other providers. It'll take a long time to work through all of this. I'm not trying to minimize your concerns, but I want to move on.
You're adding fossil fuel infrastructure.
We are. We're adding. Yep, we are. We're adding more efficient.
New York State and Ulster County is committed to not adding fossil fuel infrastructure, yet you're coming into our community and to our state, and you're telling us now that we need you to put in increased fossil fuel infrastructure. 50,000 gallon diesel tank and fracked gas. That is not what New York voters have asked for from their government and from their legislators. Ulster County is committed to it and New York State is committed to it. Why would we not want fracking in New York State and be okay with it coming from other states?
So she's 100% right.
Yeah, we don't want it.
She's 100% right.
That's so.
We don't even need it. There's no need for it.
Can you show us a proposal that doesn't use emissions, an alternative to this idea?
We don't think there's a commercial proposal that works.
Well,
and why is
our
that?
answer.
Why,
Can
we
you
don't
tell
think
us
it's,
why
it's
you're
competitive.
putting it here? Why,
Yeah.
why this location?
So that slide is in here, if I can move on eventually.
Okay,
That-
ask you just one quick question. You classify yourself as a power plant distribution plant. What other, that's what you say, this power plant, this energy that you are producing, to what services, to what area? Like,
So
where is your range?
Yeah, what area?
Yeah,
And
so-
what service, like right now we use, in this area, it's Central Hudson.
Yep.
Downstate, it's Orange and Rockland. So who's gonna buy this service and what is your radius?
So New York operates a wholesale power market that's operated by the New York Independent System Operator. So we will sell services into the New York, that market, and they will be the one that pays us.
Now, have
Central-
you already done your marketing to know what companies out there would be interested in getting your services?
They don't match one for one. So they're not a clearinghouse. They don't match us with Central Hudson.
I
They buy the
understand, but you
service.
have to do your own marketing research before you start doing this. So in your marketing research, did you figure out who within this area would be interested in your services?
Yeah. The only person that can buy our services, the only entity that can buy our services is the New York ISO. We're a wholesale generator. They're the only ones in New York that are allowed to buy the services.
And are they willing or interested in buying your
Yes,
services?
they're obligated to buy them. It's an auction process. So anybody can participate. By law, it's an open market. Anyone can participate. And you bid. It's a merit system. And so they award it to the lowest cost participant for that increment. So they run a market. There's several different products that they operate, that they clear, and there's different ways of doing it. But yes, that's exactly why we're here. And that is why we're in this part of New York, is because this is the area where the New York ISO has sent price signals saying that this sort of plant is required.
So you're required in a
Well-
residential area? I mean, I don't understand why
So
required, I'm not following.
I will get to why we chose the site
Okay.
shortly, if we can eventually move on.
Can I ask one more question? You're interested, you said you would monopolize, you would win the bid, so to say. So that would put your company in control, and what's to say you're not gonna
So that's,
astronomically raise our rates and
Yeah.
expand yourself?
so I didn't
and-
say that.
You didn't have to say that.
So let me clarify. So so we're only 20 megawatts. The New York ISO clears gigawatts, so thousands of megawatts every day, all the time. So we're not going to display. We're not going to be a market changer. We think what they'll do is they stack up all of the providers and they start at the bottom and they start picking out the cheapest ones until they get to all the ones they need. So we think that will be someplace in that stack where we'll get picked up and somebody else won't. And that's what I'm saying. Not that we're going to change or influence the market. Question about this same topic?
Yeah, shout this out, because I know you don't really have the capacity to call on people who have their hands up. So two questions. One is, are you aware that when you look at greenhouse gas cradle to grave, and you compare coal to methane, current science shows, starting with studies in 2010 that show that frac gas is worse than coal for climate. But this is 8 years later, and we have a lot of science showing that the cradle to grave emissions from frac gas are clearly worse than coal for climate. So it looks like your graphs are maybe operating as if we're using the 100-year time frame. But when you look at the 20-year time frame, methane is much worse than coal, so CH4 is worse than CO2 for climate. EPA says 86 times worse. NASA scientist Richard Schindel says 105 times worse, but it's a lot worse. So
we're using the EIA data, which is a standardized set of data for power plants. This is fine at the forum discussed where that came from. I understand there's different mechanisms associated, critical grade stuff. So I acknowledge that there's different approaches to calculating it.
Vastly different.
Yeah, we're using the EIA data, which is typically used for power plants. That's what we're using.
Okay.
That's just for tonight. That's what we're using.
So just so you know, I guess the question is, are you aware that that's outdated and
I'm aware that there are other ways of calculating the CO2 emissions from different sources of energy. You can, people can calculate that wind turbines have a CO2 footprint, all this stuff. So for the purpose of being consistent, and what we'll use for our permitting is the EIA data, which is what the industry uses.
So you're using that data, but just so everyone in the room understands, 20-year time frame is life and death. So we're in climate change right now. We're in climate chaos.
I hear you. Thank you.
People are dying. So this is not a solution.
Thank you.
It's not just a statistic. The
Larger
other
picture.
question someone else tried to ask, and we would like a more detailed answer, is could you use solar or any other kind of renewable energy to generate rather than frac gas?
So we don't think that we can achieve the project objectives with a renewable paired project.
Why?
You're
not a cheapest bidder at that point.
What's that?
You're not gonna.
That's right.
Exactly.
We don't think it's economically viable.
Maybe we can find another company that will.
Go across the street and use the transfer station from the county. They got all solar all set
Okay,
up.
can we move on? I mean, that's the thing. Is we're a private company. We are making economic decisions. We think that this is the most economic choice.
We
for
live
achieving-
here. We live here.
In moving on, are you going to show us more marketing slides to tell us how wonderful the energy is and how wonderful the project is
No, I'm
and how much we need it? Because I'll be honest with you, you're talking to a room full of people who really don't feel like we need this. Our lights come on. I've lived in a bunch of different places. This is the best place for electricity that I've ever lived. If we lose power, I live on Risley Street. If we lose power for an hour. And that's it. We have no problems at all. So you're talking to a room full of people who don't care about every slide you've shown.
This
so
isn't
far.
even needed
And I know
because we don't have any energy costs.
I know you want to like set the base and tell us how great it all is and how clean it is and all that. We're not really too interested in how you're going to help the grid. Because you're not helping us. When you say you're going to help the grid, you're not helping us. The only thing that your company's going to do to us is hurt us. So you can skip. If the next slides are on marketing and stuff like that, just skip it and let's get to how it's going to affect us. Because that's all we care about.
So this is not a decision-making meeting. We are here to share information
And we're
gather.
sharing with you.
And we're sharing it with you.
Can I finish my sentences, please? This is gonna. There's a lot of people here. I understand that some people in this room do not want this project. Be very good. We're trying to share.
So really, you're really wasting your time because it's really not going to happen.
So we're trying to share information about it, so at least we have all the facts that we believe are true.
But you're telling us we don't have a choice.
I'm not saying that.
Did you already buy the land?
No.
Thank God.
Don't buy it.
Don't buy it. The school wants
So I'm sharing information on the project. We are what we consider the planning stage. So we are making decisions with the project. We're gathering feedback. We're not making a decision about whether or not to build the project here tonight. There's not a town decision being made tonight. We have to go through all the permitting processes, and that is, if you've already made your mind you don't want the project, that I think is where you would share your opinion about that and let the people who make that decision make that decision. We already believe this is a good project for this site.
You need to come spend time in our neighborhood every meeting. We need to come and sit and have a cup of coffee and look around our neighborhood and see where we live and there's kids around and where these things are going to be built. We don't want it. We don't need it.
Okay.
Real quick, Peter. This is regarding a cost benefit analysis. Now I have a fuller understanding of how it would benefit your company and how you could be economically competitive by doing it. So I get that. What's the economic benefit to the town of Ulster?
So we'll be a property taxpayer. And
Bail on us and then you'll get it.
Just cut them all.
And the meeting is up here, folks. Yeah.
so we'll be property taxpayer. There are incentives available for some equipment we'll use, so there'll be, it won't be pure property tax. We haven't calculated that yet, and when we do, we'll share it. But yeah, we'll be, that is, there's not separate payments that we're proposing right now.
Tax credits or anything like that, that's all the,
Yeah, there'll be, I don't think there, so we've worked through that there, I mean, there's not a hybrid battery gas tax credit for some reason in Ulster County, surprisingly. So there's not, so I think we'll pay a piece of property taxes. We haven't figured out what we do, we'll share it. But we're looking right now at what property tax rates apply. I think I'd be lying to you if I said we're not looking for incentives we can use, but if they're there, we'll take advantage of it. If they're not, we think the project works
so
anyways.
the only benefit to the town would be the taxes.
So so I mean, the direct financial benefit is the taxes, yeah. And I think there's a couple of things that we've agreed to do already with the town. We've agreed to designate project forever green, so the remainder of the property won't be developed. We're looking at doing some water line improvements in the area, but that's all minor. I think that we got a broader argument about, or broader discussion about some of the less direct benefits. I don't think it's going to be efficient right now, but I'm happy to have it with those who are interested afterwards. But I think that's not going to.
Sir, with all due respect, would you put your family in this development
Yeah.
and live here with your children?
100 feet behind the nearest.
Well, there's
He's gonna say that.
townhouses for sale.
All right, here we go forward. All right, so we also think that we've hit several energy goals. I'm just going to leave this up here because we've already had some of these conversations in the group here, but we think that despite some of the things in the room, we think that there are several of the stated energy goals in New York State that we help progress. Not all the way to the fulfilling, but we think our project does align with the state's stated energy policy. Obviously, that's open to interpretation. Okay.
How does putting something that doesn't currently exist bring a 40% reduction when you're adding to?
Because we're displacing, so our thesis, and I think there's people here who don't agree, so we're happy to, after this, I don't think it's efficient to have the conversation because I think everyone knows what people think. But we think, our view is that we're displacing less efficient, more carbon intensive providers of the same services. So when we are on, the other providers are not. That's our view, and that's how we think that
Where are the other providers?
It's a whole mix across New York. It's difficult to point to individual providers.
They're in other places and not here.
They're not next to where we're building the project. No, that's right.
But then is that assuming you're going to be on more? Because if you're supposed to be backup, that seems to make us believe that you want to be on more. Then it will be more than a backup.
So this, and I think there are many services that are important to the grid that don't require a generator to actually be operating. In fact, you get paid to be available to operate if there is a grid event that requires you to come online very quickly. And so a lot of the services that we're providing, yeah.
I mean, I've got an analogy that might help drive that point home, is that it's like paying for a security service. What the grid pays generators like ours for, and the existing set of generators, is the security of being able to turn on if load goes up. If everybody turns on air conditioners, turns on lights.
Did you hear us before? We're not interested in that. That doesn't affect us.
Some people might be. We're trying to answer the
understand
question.
that. You're not building it in their backyard.
So
So
to continue that
all of
analogy,
this doesn't matter.
a security service doesn't get paid by the crime. It gets paid a fee to be there in case it's needed. And that's the way this facility works, and that's the way that other higher carbon emitting.
That's what I don't understand.
Put it in
Is it
place that
needed?
needed
That's
it.
what I'm saying. It keeps saying when it's there when we need it.
So there are current,
We don't need it.
So there are current plants that, what we're saying is that there are current plants that are providing this service right now.
So build next to them.
There are current plants that provide, yeah, there are current plants that provide this service right now. We think that we can do it more efficiently because we're going to be doing it with less fuel, and so we'll displace those current providers. It's not new demand for this service. It is that we are a more efficient, lower cost way of doing it.
You know, I'm just trying to be honest. I mean, I lived here for almost 25 years now in the same house, and I've never had a problem with air conditioning going down, lights going down.
That's because people are buying these services.
So
that's the thing, is that the people, the reason that doesn't happen, the reason the grid is so reliable is because the grid operator procures And it has these services in their control system.
And is currently purchasing that from 50, 60, 70-year-old power plants that are going to be shut down, that are going to have events that cause them to be shut down, are uneconomic and higher carbon emissions.
I just want to like put this project in context, which you're not mentioning, but your project is here because a couple of years ago, in 2015, the FERC approved a new capacity zone for Central Hudson Service Territory for what's called Zone G, our zone. And what that did was fold our area into the capacity zone of the more populated areas downstate that use a lot more energy, that have a much bigger peak demand. And essentially, we all fought it. Our municipalities all opposed that. The Public Service Commission sued the FERC, tried to get it overturned. But what it essentially does is pay these guys a lot more money to come into our territory to provide capacity. We don't believe we need that right here in our area. It's all serving to reduce peak demand downstate where the population centers.
Well, that's where they should build it, like he's saying.
So
We don't need it here.
Yeah, exactly.
Build it over there where they're using it.
We're cheap, that's why.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
We're cheap.
Wait,
So, yeah.
wait, hold on one second. Could you please go back? I want to hear your interpretation of how you're supporting these energy goals. Some of us have studied energy pretty carefully for the last decade.
So
how do you explain that?
So
Please.
I'm going to explain it, and what I would request is that if we want to have discussion about our interpretation.
I just want to hear what you have to say.
So just to make sure you keep moving on. I'll explain why we think we meet all four of these, and then I will stick around.
I want you to explain how your project
Yes.
is going to impact.
So I'm going to explain that, and then what I'm saying is that I'll do that here, and then we're going to move on. And if you want discussions about it, we can do it after. We just need to keep moving on.
That's fine.
So. There is a recently enacted energy storage target. Governor Cuomo signed it late last year. We're building energy storage. We help advance that target. That's that one. Renewable energy generation. So there's 50% renewable energy target in New York, 50% by 2035. When you add intermittent generation, wind, solar, it increases what's called the control error, which is the ups and downs of the grid. And so when you add renewable generation, the changes, the variable changes in output require more frequency regulation service, which is one of the services we're providing. The other thing is that renewables, there's great algorithms to schedule when wind or when solar is going to come online, but they're not perfect. And what often happens is the forecasting error results in the grid operator planning to have a 300 megawatt or 200 megawatt wind project online at 9 a.m. or more likely 9 p.m., but the wind doesn't show up at 9 p.m. because the wind doesn't work that way. And so what they do is when they plan to have that wind project on at 9 p.m. and it's not there, they have to find alternative sources to meet that load. But a lot of those alternative sources require a certain amount of startup time, and once they're started, they have to run for a certain period of time before they can be shut down. And so then when the wind does show up at 9, 10 p.m., they have this other generation resource working, and they have the wind, and they have to find more solutions to that problem.
That's not entirely true, though. There's tons of large-scale utility battery levels that can
So I'm simplifying here. I'm just trying to explain this. Like I said, having to have discussions. The grid is very complex. You can take classes that go on for semesters about how the grid works. That's not tonight. So I'm trying to simplify. You're right. There is ways you can do the batteries. You could do it with pumped hydro. You could do it with fancy aeroderivative turbines. There's lots of ways to do it. Our way is one way to do it. But we think that problem exists, and we think we're offering a solution. And finally, oops. There we go. Finally, we're offering grid resiliency. So we think that in times when there is problems with the grid, that Central Hudson could call on us to provide local microgrid services by powering the feeders, the distributions that we're connected to. So because we can operate independently, we don't need to have the grid to make our facility operate. That's when we meet those objectives. I move on now. Happy to answer questions afterwards. I understand there's questions and interpretations of that, but that's my view on how we meet those objectives. So Here's the details about the project. Now that we're kind of past why we're doing this. It's going to be, we're planning two major components. We're planning the battery system and the reciprocating engine system. The batteries we're planning to use are most likely lithium-ion batteries. There's various types of lithium-ion batteries, and we're still working through the exact type, but lithium-ion batteries, same basic technology that's in a cell phone or a laptop computers. Batteries are going to
blow up and catch on fire constantly. It's all over the news. They burn up constantly.
So batteries, that's the why we're using. This is a picture of our Jake energy storage facility in Chicago. This is an operating battery project. We're planning to use similar batteries to this, not this exact design, but similar.
Did you build that facility in people's backyards in Chicago?
The Jake energy facility is not. The Elwood facility is about 100 foot from the neighborhood.
And how did those people react?
We have not heard any complaints.
Oh, I can't believe that. No complaints.
Yeah, I have another slide, so I'll answer that question, but it's in a future slide. Okay, so that's that. The batteries are containerized. There are batteries and racks in there. The question about fires, there is, like everything, there's not perfect, so there is potential for a fire. So we prevent that is there is an internalized fire prevention system that has multiple components. One is that the battery cells are separated from one another, and then there is a fire extinguishing system in the container itself to extinguish a fire. And then as you can see, they're on this gravel pad so that if both of those fail, the fire will be contained.
How big are the buildings?
These are 40-foot shipping containers. We're planning to have anywhere from 9 to 11 of them. I don't know where that question. Those are the batteries.
Oh, we have a mall we can use.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, right.
Those are the batteries. So that's the battery system. There's an inverter system. There's other subcomponents that we're happy to walk through on our drawings, but that's the basic battery system.
And what kind of a strain is that going to put on our fire department if there should be a problem?
I don't think there'll be any. And
Famous last words.
Well, I mean, so we haven't done the study. So one of the things we're planning to study is fire prevention, fire response.
And the chemicals that you would use to put that fire out, should there be a fire, what kind of impact is that going to have on us?
It's a halon system. And it's
Oh,
contained
that's
in
just
containers.
wonderful. That stuff makes you walk up off the floor by just sniffing a bunch of it.
That's why they're
behind the
Maybe we need that.
So I can't, there's people talking, I can't hear you.
Other than proposing to put this in a residential area, there is a school in close proximity. Has this been discussed at all with the school board at all?
So this is the same sort of system that's in data rooms, computer
That's not my
centers.
question, it's a yes or no question.
So we
This
haven't-
is the proximity of a school. You've already answered the fire department question, you haven't even discussed it with them. We don't even know how this impacts with our water department. What about with the school?
So we have
As a
not,
presentation.
we have not discussed with the school. We're happy to look into that as part of our study plans though. And if you put on a question card, I'll make sure we do it.
I just find it a little disheartening that this has been presented to the board, to our town supervisor. I only knew about it through a newspaper article in December.
Right, it was very secretive.
Okay, it was,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But then when I'm sitting here, I ask about your marketing, we think. I ask you about these other agencies, these other communities. Well, we haven't yet. Give us these questions. I have to think either you have the answers to them. I can't see a company, any company, your company or any other company, propose and put in something and not having a full marketing background to know whether or not it is doable, viable, and anything in the community is going to be affected.
So,
I mean, don't laugh, sir. Okay, I'm a layman. I'm a homeowner in that area. Blood, sweat, and tears went into my home.
Yeah,
You proposing this into the community is not only going to affect us in so many ways that you have to understand and appreciate. We are here with many questions, whether they're annoying questions to you or illiterate questions to you. This is us.
They're not.
We
So,
need to
my
address it.
my reaction there was not to your questions. So this is it's somewhat of a catch-22. We either approach the community early on, sharing what we know, we don't know, ask for feedback, or we do all of our research, spend a bunch of money developing a project, and show up and it's all fully baked and say, here's how it's gonna have to be.
But don't you think that's a better presentation and you make the people feel more comfortable, that you have more knowledge behind what you're...
I think some people, we're gonna do both, right? The purpose today is to gather initial feedback so that when we can still economically have chances to make changes to the project, we can still do it.
How are we coming across so far?
I have a few more slides. I'm sure I can convert the rest of you in a few more slides here.
Trying to get us to change our opinion, right?
No, I mean, this is this is feedback, right? Like this is, I mean, we're gonna think about.
We're trying to tell you something.
Save
your money.
I'm hearing it. I think so.
Save your time and save your commute from Minnesota.
So we think so. This is all. So this is the feedback we're looking for. Clearly, there are people who have concerns with the project. People who don't like the project. We want to see those questions we can answer. We want to see those changes we can make, and we plan to answer the questions, make the changes we can, and continue to talk. And if at the end of the day the town decides this is not the right project for the right spot, we're not going to move forward. But we think that it's worth a discussion, and that's what we're trying to have. We're trying to start the discussion, have the discussion now, and we think it's worth having. We think this is how development ought to work, is that when a project idea comes forward, we tell you what we know, we tell you what we don't know, we tell you what we're planning, we hear the feedback, and we react to that feedback. And that's what we're doing tonight. So we don't know all the answers, we want to hear the questions, we want to hear the concerns, we want you to give us time to answer the questions, react to them, make changes, and we'll see where we go from there. That's the plan.
Have
So
you
that's what
looked
we're
at
doing
other properties, or is this the first property?
This is the site we have here, yeah. This is the
Have
one.
you looked at any other sites?
In Ulster, town of Ulster, no.
Right, that's not in a residential area?
No, this is-
There's a lot of property back
county.
here, I'm sure, if you look at the tax map, that you could go.
So I have a slide later on about why we chose this site, and I'll explain those, respond to that there. So here's a schematic of how the thing works. So this is the engineering schematic. I'm going to go through it quick. This will be available on the website for you to look at, ask questions about. But basically the way it works is this is the facility right here, this box. We're connected to the Central Hudson electric system, with the electric line right there. We're using the existing right-of-way, so one of the reasons we chose the site we have is because there's existing right-of-way infrastructure coming to the site. We don't have to build new linear facilities. That's that. And the site also has grid-supplied gas, so there's a gas line on the site. So the site has both gas and electric on site, so we can use those two resources that are there on the property. And then we'll have an on-site backup fuel, which is ultra-low sulfur diesel. It's on the plans, and that's the backup fuel. So when the gas is disrupted, we'll be using the backup fuel. So those are the power inputs and outputs, electric out and this stuff in. We have a control system, a master control system that'll operate the entire project, both the batteries and the engines. They'll work together as a system, and we'll have a master controller that tells the system what to do. And the inputs to that are instructions from the grid operator, so from New York ISO. They will tell us what to do. Once we put our project into the market and open it up to them, they're the ones who give us instructions and tell the project what to do. Turn on, turn off, operate, stand by, whatever the right decision is. That's what the grid operator does. And one of the inputs to that grid operator is the pricing of the project, which I talked about earlier about the auction process and stacking resources. That's all part of that math of how that works. That's the schematic. So then the batteries and engines are there together. The batteries obviously can go both ways. They can charge and discharge. The engines can run at full or partial load. We're planning to have 2 engine sets, each about 10 megawatts. And so they can operate independently. They can both operate. They can not operate at all. And they can both be controlled. They can go up and down and operate that way. And they'll be all connected through a set of transformers that match the project voltage to the grid. Yes?
In terms of the grid-supplied gas, there is talk of a compressor station in the Washington Avenue area of Kingston. Does this project necessitate that? Because the neighbors there are very concerned about that.
So we're not involved with that project at all. I don't think that this project would make or break a compressor station. We're pulling off the existing grid. We're using interruptible gas, so we're not creating firm gas demand. I mean, obviously, every time you add a stove to the gas system, you add enough of those, there's more gas demand. So there will be, broad demand, but we're not locking in gas requirements for our project.
The gas is going up to 100-foot smokestacks, right?
No, 80 foot, 60, 80 feet. So with the project,
80 feet, okay.
So the original application said 100. We've heard feedback that that's not ideal, so we're working to reduce them. Right now, we can commit to being no taller than 80, and we're looking for be closer to 60. On our site, the trees are about 70 foot tall. So right now, we're hoping we get below the trees, at least to 70 feet, if not lower.
But we're still going to be breathing the emissions, whether we see them or
You're not,
not.
we are.
And I just would like to comment on the process here. And also, I do have a question, it's related to the town and taxes. I just want to say that, you're involved in doing the presentation, and many of us have stopped listening because, we're not on board with this. So, if I were working for this company, I might have to go back and tell my boss, this community didn't even let me finish the presentation.
Right.
And what does that say?
Right.
So that's number one. And also what I'd like to say about what you've shown on these beautiful things that you've filed. You've shown, solar panels, you've shown wind panels, you've used the word hybrid, you've used the word reduction of emissions. Number one, we don't have any emissions going on right now, and this is not a solar or wind panel project. So it feels a little bit sometimes like a shell game to us because we're not being told the full truth. So that's my observation about what's going on here. Secondly, I'm wondering, and the only other thing I have to say is, what does the town have to gain about this? These are 3 taxable parcels, I understand. So are we going to get more taxes as a result of this? Is the town going to get more taxes? Because we've lost a lot of property. We have a big IBM place here that isn't filled. It's not making any money. Our mall locally is going out of business. So I understand that our town supervisor and the board probably would like to find a way to bring more money to our community. But we have become, as has been said, a sustainable community. We have farm to market. Our whole community is changing. People are moving from the city. And this doesn't fit that picture. So what is the town getting out of this?
So, first of all, I apologize you don't think we're being honest, because we're trying to be honest, we're trying to be transparent. This is we're holding this because we understood that there were people who were concerned about the project, who opposed the project. This is not required under any of the town's policies or any of the seeker processes. We're doing this because we understood there were people who had questions and concerns and comments. So you don't have to be here. We think everybody who's here is interested in the project and wants to learn about it, which we're trying to share more information. We're hearing your feedback, and trust me, we're going to have a discussion about all of this feedback when we get done. But we want to share this information. And we do think, and I understand there's points to discuss, we do think it advances incrementally towards lowering carbon emissions in New York. So that's what we think. And then,
But not here.
it depends on how broad you want to look. On the tax parcels we're on, it does change emission profile. That's true. So anyways, we think that's that. So I think that we're not trying to greenwash this or anything. We think this is truly what we think. We're not trying to spin anyway.
I think it's a point well taken in terms of your graphics with the solar panels and the wind turbines. There's nothing like that going on in your project.
Right. Yeah, that stuff doesn't apply here. You can take those words out, they don't mean anything.
So I mean,
So
that's gratuitous graphics that is trying to influence your project in terms of our perception of it.
What we're trying to do with those graphics. So those graphics are the first slide talking about our company. It's our company does all of those things.
Right, but
Not doing
that's not
it
this project.
So there's no solar on this slide.
No, we see the gas supplied and we see the backup diesel. That is not wind and that is not solar.
Right.
Right.
That's true. So
So
we're not trying to.
some of us get a sense that you're being a bit divisive with your graphics.
You're being very
I think if we got through the entire presentation, you'd see that as we got into project details, we were very open about what we're doing. We've only gotten to slide 11. So we're getting there.
Out of how many?
Sure, question. 15 maybe?
Can you tell us what the backup fuel would be?
Ultra low sulfur diesel.
Yes.
Ultra low sulfur diesel.
Where does it come from?
The diesel fuel from
That you'll be using?
from the pipeline system. So we will buy it. It'll be delivered to the sites. We're not putting any sort of petroleum pipelines in. We'll buy it from the market and deliver it.
But